Fun fact: flying FPV makes people happy, and if the quad doesn't fly properly, there's definitely less happiness. Welcome to a new repair video. Let's take a look at what we're fixing this time. Speaking of happiness, at least someone wants me to be happy. Nice. The drone in focus today is a Bee35 from SpeedyBee. The Bee35 is a small, lightweight, 3.5-inch FPV freestyle drone with prop guards. It is designed for smooth, stable flying and high-quality video, offering a great balance between power and control for both indoor and outdoor use. At least, that's what SpeedyBee says. But let's take a look at why this drone ended up on my bench. The owner has experienced several times that the drone suddenly decides to fall out of the sky on multiple occasions, which naturally has made him lose trust in the drone. Let's see what happens and if we can make sense of it. Okay, there it is. Let's watch it again, frame by frame. The drone flips to the right, which most likely means something is going on with the motors on the right side. It also looks like it dips slightly forward, which could point to the front right motor. Unfortunately, we have neither a black box log nor OSD from the goggles, only DVR footage from the air unit. In addition to this, the owner wants to install an RP3 antenna diversity receiver. He also has a new motor to replace since the prop screw holes on one of the motors have become worn out. Let's see if we can get inside this drone so we can get a better picture of its condition. I got to say, this is my first time working on a Bee35 frame, so I'm struggling a bit to find the right screws. On one of the motors, the threads in the screw holes are worn out, so the propeller doesn't sit properly. We're going to replace it, but that has nothing to do with the drone flipping out of the sky. So, okay, let's take a look at what we've got here. The stack is a SpeedyBee F7 Mini V2. I can see it's coated with some kind of pink rubber-like material, which will probably give me a bit of trouble. Many of the solder joints look good, but there are also a few that look a bit sketchy. The solder pads on this stack are very small, both the motor pads on the ESC and the pads on the flight controller, which makes it quite difficult to work with. I can also see that the motor wires have been spliced at some point, and some of those splices look a bit suspicious. So dealing with issues like this can be pretty challenging when there's no obvious cause and the problem isn't constant either. The drone does fly, but it occasionally flips out. It could be a short somewhere against the frame, a bad splice or solder joint on one of the wires, a faulty motor, or even a desync. In some cases, it can also be the ESC, but then the issue is usually a bit more consistent. After talking with the owner, we agreed that I'll rebuild the entire drone from scratch. I'll replace the components he wanted me to change, and in the end, I'll spend extra time properly testing the drone before sending it back to him. So, at the end of this video, I'm going all in to test this drone and see if the problem is gone. As I suspected, this pink rubber coating is creating a mess. The smell of melted plastic is not exactly pleasant. Since the motor wire splices looked the way they did, I'm redoing those as well. It could be enough that one of them occasionally shorts against the frame, causing that motor to have issues. I'm replacing the motor that had worn out prop screw threads. These motors use a T-mount setup. If the screws aren't long enough, the threads can wear out pretty quickly. The owner told me he's lost a prop mid-flight several times, which is definitely pretty annoying. To splice the motor wires, I'm using some 18 gauge wires I had lying around. Ideally, 20 gauge would have been enough, but at least the color matches on a SpeedyBee drone. I'm not a big fan of splicing wires like this. The important thing is to avoid any sharp edges on the solder joint so it doesn't wear through the heat shrink and down into the frame. After many wire splices later, I'm ready to solder the motors back on, but first I want to get the capacitor in place since it's a tight fit and much harder to do afterward. I'm replacing the capacitor with a new one just to be on the safe side. A bad capacitor can also cause issues. The motor pads on this ESC are very small. They also have a kind of notch in them, so it looks like the best approach is to bring the wires in from underneath and up. But I have to be careful with the amount of solder. If the solder balls get too big here, it's easy to create a bridge. The solder I'm using is mechanic solder that I buy from AliExpress. I can link it along with my other tools down in the video description. One other thing, if you've made it this far into the video, I'd really appreciate it if you subscribed to the channel, and if you've already done that, thank you so much. Okay, I think that turned out alright, apart from the fact that the original black motor wire is giving me some serious OCD issues. I'm replacing the XT60 leads since the old ones looked stiff and worn out. To replace them, I'm using 14 gauge wires. They're a good size and more than sufficient for this quad. Pretty tight, but I think it will work just fine. Now, it's time for a quick smoke test before moving on. All good. Now it's time to get the flight controller back in place, but first I'm adding a bit of insulation around the XT60 pads, just to be safe. I'm using some M2 rubber rings to create a bit of space between the ESC and the flight controller. Without them, the ESC cable plug seems to rest directly on the ESC, which could introduce unnecessary noise. Now it's time to get this whole TPU, GPS, and antenna situation sorted out. As I mentioned, the owner wants to install a new receiver, a Radiomaster RP3 with 2 antennas. But first, I want to look at what I can do with the GPS. According to the owner, it has been performing poorly, most likely because it's a mini GPS module, and the wires are long and run right past both the antennas and the XT60 cables. What I want to do is add some shielding to the GPS cable. I'll probably never get super duper performance, but maybe we can get around 8 to 10 satellites. That should at least make GPS rescue work reasonably well. To create the shielding, I'm using a thin copper tape that I wrap around the GPS wire. Just make sure it doesn't get too thick, only a single layer, otherwise the cable becomes stiff and difficult to work with. For the shielding to be effective, it needs to be grounded, so I'm soldering on a wire that I'll later connect to a ground pad. Finally, I wrap it in cloth tape so it doesn't short anything out. I haven't fully decided where to mount the second antenna yet, but I'm guessing it'll go on one of the arms. There aren't really any other good options. As everything starts coming together, this frame gets pretty tight. I'm planning to mount the receiver on the side of the stack, on the plastic that makes up the prop guard. The air unit sits in a slot above or below the stack, depending on how you look at it. On this flight controller, there's no DJI plug, so it has to be soldered on. I'm also cutting away the yellow S-bus wire. It serves no purpose here. Sorry, Frank. I also try to keep the wires as short as possible, especially with this setup, where they would otherwise end up running over the flight controller. This V2 flight controller doesn't have any 5-volt pads powered by USB, which is a bit unfortunate. It means we can't set up the receiver without plugging in a battery, while the O3 unit tends to overheat pretty quickly. Now one last test before the final assembly. Everything looks good, the receiver is working and the VTX is up and running. Now it's just a matter of getting everything packed into the frame. To mount the receiver, I'm using a piece of strong double-sided tape. I think that will be more than sufficient. The second antenna goes on the arm. I would have preferred to mount it vertically, but there's no practical way to make that happen. I'm not entirely sure what I think about the design of this frame. In many ways, it's a good design, as long as you don't actually have to work on it, I think. So, now the drone is fully rebuilt. This turned into a long repair, but I hope it was worth it. Join me for the last few minutes of this video and let's see if it flies without flipping out of the sky. I'm also going to retune it since the previous tune was pretty loose. Alright, so today we've got sunshine, but also a fair bit of wind, which honestly is pretty typical when I'm out testing a freshly repaired quad. So I flew about 15 packs on this quad with a pretty high camera up tilt, really pushing the motors as much as possible. At times, I almost forgot it was a whoop I was flying and even tried a few mediocre freestyle moves. But the quad flew well, and the issue where it flips out and drops to the ground didn't happen. So I'd say this drone is officially back to full health, and I trust it, but the owner will probably need to rebuild that trust himself before taking it back to the ski slope. When it comes to tuning this drone, it was surprisingly easy to dial in. There was extremely little noise reaching the gyro, as you can see here from the unfiltered gyro data. This allowed me to push the sliders quite high without getting D-term oscillations or hot motors. The only thing I can't really tune out completely is prop wash, which is expected since it's a whoop-style frame with prop guards. So, I think that brings us to the end of this video. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more content like this.